Hey guys, and welcome back to another color grading tutorial. Now, if you have watched some of our last videos, you will notice that I am, yes, still wearing the same jumper. That's just because I haven't got much time this month to film videos, so I'm literally just filming every single video in like a 4-day period. Now, we are editing like the artist John Edlind today. This is another Lightroom color grading tutorial, and this guy here, Lenny, asked if we could do it. I think he asked a couple of times actually, which is probably why he said Johnny Edlind when. So yeah, that's the plan. We're going to be trying to edit like the artist Johnny, and this is his Instagram page here. So if you want to go ahead, check him out. Search his name into Instagram and potentially drop him a follow, but he's got enough of them. No. So his kind of idea of his color grade is, if you know the artist, what's his name, Marcus Vallier something or other, he worked with Jon Olsen. Very similar style to that, which is very warm photos taken at sunset, and got very like lots of oranges in, very contrasty, lots of clarity, and he's got some cool flares on the sun. So that's what we're going to be trying to do today. It should be a pretty easy color grade, and it should be quite a fun color grade. I love doing these kinds of color grades, they're really cool to do. The other thing to note is he's very desaturated. The only colours that are like very vibrant are the oranges and browns, which is why it's such an easy colour grade, because everywhere you go, when you take a photo, there'll usually be greens, oranges and browns, and if it's greens, you can make the greens orange and brown instantaneously within Lightroom, and then everything else just desaturates. So it's quite an easy colour grade to do, which means you can get a very cool looking theme. And even here, so like this field is full of like yellows and greens, just fits in perfectly, and then obviously like a little bit of blues if you want them in your image. But that's the idea, and we're going to be basing our image off this one here. Now if you want to follow along on this tutorial, if you haven't watched our last videos, you'll notice what we do is we go onto wesaturate.com, which is this glorious website here, and this is the photo we're going to be editing. So this was just on the home page. I don't know what you need to type to find it, but basically you want to download the raw files. It's by this geezer here, so go check him out and download that photo if you want to follow along with this tutorial. I will try and remember to put the link in the description, but no, my luck, I probably won't get around to it. Right, so let's jump into the video tutorial. So this is it in Lightroom, and let's go back onto the photo that we're going to be editing and basing it off. Now the reason I chose this photo is because it's got those sort of like bluey highlights, like the whites, and then also the browns from the wood. So bluey highlights and the browns from the wood, and obviously the skin tones work with the browns from the wood as well. So let's get started. It's pretty cool color grade. So first things first, we're going to just boost up the shadows just to brighten up this image and the exposure in total. Now his images aren't actually that bright. He makes the highlights incredibly bright, but they're not like too light images, so I don't want to go too bright. I want to keep it around here. Then the highlights, I'm actually going to boost the highlights, I think, because he literally has no detail in the highlights in the windows here. So we're going to boost out those highlights. Then we're going to come down to the whites, shoot up the whites, drop the blacks, add in some cool contrast there. Now what we're going to do is just drop the highlights back a bit, because I don't want to go too bright in those highlights. I want to go bright enough, but that should do. Okay, we're going to add in a little bit of contrast as well now. I don't want to overdo the contrast, but he does have a lot of contrast in it. So, in fact, let's do that in the tone curve and do some funky things in the tone curve later. So leave the contrast alone, and stay until the end if you want to see that. Now the other thing to do is have, oops, she went really weird looking then, is come on to, so we're going to have a look through now, and his images are warmed up quite a bit. So we're going to drag the temperature slider, and we're going to increase it a tiny bit, not too much. I don't want it to look like, I don't know, an Oompa Loompa. So we're going to go somewhere around here, and I'm going to watch this video back and be really embarrassed. And then we're going to drop the, no we're not, so add a little bit of dehaze just to clear up this image. It is looking a little bit like foggy for some weird reason. Now you should have dehaze, so it depends what version of Lightroom you're on. Some of our videos we have it on, some of them we've got the old version of Lightroom, but have a go. It just helps clear up the image a little bit more. Then we're going to come onto the clarity, and we're just going to bump in some clarity like that. Plus 25 is probably the limit. We don't want to go any higher than that, otherwise we're going to get a very strange looking image. But that gives you this sort of wild texture you've got going on here. You see here where you've got very harsh contrast. The really harsh contrast comes from the clarity slider, which is what we're getting on the face and skin right now. So already we're basically there on the color grade. Pretty simple to do. Tone curve we will come back to. Let's have a look at the HSL slider. This is always the most fun part. Now we're going to look at the skin tone. I'm going to try and find one that's actually more zoomed in so it's easier to see. So this one here, skin tone is probably a bit too yellowy orange here. I want to desaturate the skin tone. So first of all, let's just try and get the colours right. If I go to the left, add in a little bit more red. I don't want to make it too green. So say stick to the left hand side. Then on the oranges, again, tiny bit more. He has like it's a very rich orange. And the way we achieve that is by taking the sliders to the left, because if we go to the right it kind of adds in yellows and greens, which just looks really weird on skins. So if you're doing skin tone, you usually try and stay to the left of the centre, but don't really go too far. Now because this image is mainly her and her face and her hands, I don't want to mess around with the reds and oranges too much, because it's going to become very noticeable if I do too much on those, because her skin tone will just look a little bit too funky. Now for the yellows, we're not really, it's just down here, we're going to have that colour changing, and that's where we're going to use this one of the field that I showed you, this one here, as a reference. So I think the best way of doing that is, if I go to the right it just makes it like ludicrously green. So I think we'll take it to the left on the yellows, and then also on the greens, and that's going to kind of orange out those greens down there. That's the saturation slider. I wondered why it was doing weird things. So the yellow slider, if I go to the right, makes it really green. Go to the left, it makes it more orange. And left a bit on the greens as well. Okay, now the next thing is the aquas and the blues. He has his blues seem to be mostly like a natural blue. He doesn't put too much teal in them, except for like here, for example, that's like ridiculously teal. Here, mostly just normal blue. So he has a bit of teal in, so, excuse me, thought that was Sam Calder's photo. Okay, so the blues, we're going to drop those down a little bit, and the aquas as well. And really, it's just going to be adjusting this area up here, so not too much. I reckon that's probably about all we can do, because we did warm up the temperature. There's not much blue in this image that's left. Okay, next thing to do is come on to the saturation, and this is the fun part, because we're going to come to everything and just desaturate literally, or not completely, but mostly everything. Greens, desaturate, yellows, where are they gone? Desaturate, so that's this colour down here. Leaving a bit more just because we want that kind of funky looking field green that we had here. Then let's have a look at the oranges. I think we want to take a bit out of the oranges, and that's where we're kind of getting that. It's not a, so when I mentioned the skin tone, it's like a sort of rich orange, but it's not vibrant. So look here, the skin tone, that's kind of what we're aiming for. And the way of doing that is just taking out a little bit of saturation, and I think we're probably getting there, so I don't want to go too low because it just looks the wrong colour. So let's stick around there. I reckon we're getting pretty close to the overall colour grade now. And that's it for the saturation. Now for the luminance, I'm going to try and lighten up. So all of the colours are basically lightened up a little bit. So the skin tones, not so much, just because we're trying to keep that contrast, trying to keep that rich colour. But the yellows definitely like making those brighter. Not that bright, that's a little bit extreme. Adds cool colour going on the background. But definitely the blues, literally going to brighten it all the way up. Now your image, you won't want to go all the way up because your skies will look pretty funky. But everything else, let's just sort of really brighten up the rest of the image. And that's it for the HSL slider. So if I turn the HSL slider off, it makes a dramatic difference. And with this colour grade, it's really the saturation that we're messing around with, not so much the colours, because most of the image is just the wood and the skin tone colour, which is already fine. Then for the highlights in the split toning, look here, we've kind of got almost, so actually I think we're going to try something interesting here. So the highlights have kind of got blues and teals in them. And the shadows is just like a sort of orangey brown. So the highlights, we're going to go for blue. So pressing Option or Alt on your keyboard, dragging this along. Let's go for, well, that's a cool blue, but let's go for that colour. 200, and then just add in some saturation, so we think that's kind of like cool. and what it's going to do is make the image a lot sort of colder. So to balance that, we're going to come onto the shadows and find a nice warm orange. So 26 I think is a good starting point, and then add those in as well, about plus 15, and that's kind of it, I think. So have a look at the difference that's made, just warmed up the overall image. And then we're going to have a go with, that's basically, well, that is the colour grade done. That's the before, that's the after. I hope you guys liked the colour grade. But what we're going to do before you go is have a mess around with this ellipse tool. Now the reason I'm doing this is because if you look, let's just sort that out because that's creeping me out. So invert the mask and start again. Now if you look at his images, he has flare, like here, here. Now a lot of the time people think, you know, you're going to have to do that in Photoshop, and it is a lot easier. Well, it's not a lot easier, but you can do it within Photoshop if you have like overlays and things like that to put on, which we do sell. If you want to go ahead, grab our overlays and presets and stuff, the link is in the description. But you can also do it within Lightroom. So this is the ellipse tool. Then you want to come down to invert it, put the feathering up to about 80, maybe 100. We're going to warm up the temperature within there. We're going to come on to dehaze and just add in some sort of haze into the image. That gives us that kind of flare. Then you can just whack up the highlights, make it a lot brighter, feathering up to full. Then you can just add in some warmer colours there, like that. Kind of cool. And if you want to, come to the colour picker tool here, pick like a sort of sunset colour. I'm doing this very quickly, but that, for example, and that adds in some colour there. And then just drag it out and make it a lot bigger. And there you have it. You have your nice flare, like that. Probably a little bit too extreme, but you know, you get the idea. That is how you do flares within Lightroom. So you don't have to do it within Photoshop. Now, if you watch our free training, the link is down below. In that free training, we're going to teach you how to do things like that, how you can use the ellipse tool to make flares, how you can use it for little lighting elements. We also teach you how to mess around with the skin tone as well, and skin retouching, everything like that. So go ahead. If you want to learn how to use Lightroom for like really advanced edits, go ahead, check that out. It's like an hours long free training, 100% free. Just sign up, register for that, and we take you through a really advanced edit within Lightroom. Now, within that tutorial, you're going to learn some really cool color layering techniques, color grading. You're going to learn how to use the ellipse tool and like different lighting techniques, how to clear up skin, and then just an awesome color grade on top of that as well with some other added bonuses. So save some time for that. If you want to go ahead, check that out. That link is down below. Now, if you want to also go ahead, grab our presets and our course and anything like that, the links are also down below as well. The presets are currently on a massive discount, so check those out while you can. Without any further ado, I will see you in the next video. Live long and prosper.